Hello, my name is Brant Hunt, and my channel is Discerning What Is True, which is on YouTube. I also have a channel on Odyssey, and I'm also on Facebook Live. Today, I'm going to be reading from a particular book by what I call Rene Schwaller de Lubicz, on sacred science. And this particular chapter, not a particular chapter, but this is basically the total topic. The complete title is Sacred Science, the King of Pharonic Theocracy. So I've done a couple of books by Rene Schwaller, and I feel like he's well worth reading. Um, Phil Langdon is the one who suggested him to me to look into. So that's what I'm doing. So we're going to be reading here today. I hope that all is well with all of you out there. Again, we wish you the best today. So here we go. And I might show a couple plates that he's shared in his books. I don't know if I'll share that at the beginning, but this will be the first chapter is called Concerning Theocracy. Let me just say this. I'm very much impressed with this guy, and I'm also impressed with another particular writer, uh, which is Alvin Boyd Kuhn. Uh, these guys are major league theocracies, theocracies, but they also are what I'm looking at, what I call esotericism of the scriptures. And I noted I was looking at something last night, and sometime maybe you can do a research on concordance, that is a Bible concordance, and see how many times you see this, the number 7 comes up. Okay, that's important. And then we also know simply is that the number 3 is metaphysics. It's there to give you a, not a warning, but basically to have heads up. There's something important in the Bible being shared here, you see. So let's get into the book. Bear with me just a second as I scroll down here. Actually, I am going to share a couple plates here on here because they're actually at the beginning of the book. These are a couple of these here. The one on this the side here is a knife handle. It's all kinds of artwork on here, which I believe is important for those who have the ability to see what's being shared. And also on the other side is a piece here. Let me just take this cover off here. Oh, no, it won't work that way. So here we go, trying to get it up here close. So I just want to show you those 2 plates there. Let's continue on. It's amazing work when you look at it shows the animals on here and also some other pictures of, not pictures, but drawings, artwork of certain symbols, I should say. Anyway, I'm here to read the book, so let's get into the book here. He also has one of the Christ on the cross, which is not literal at all. So we're gonna read the what I call the introduction to it, so to give you a groundwork of what's really about this book. It's all about, um, and so progress by definition signifies the expansion of accepted frameworks. You see, but going beyond well-defined borders always provokes more or less sectarian objections, be they from science or religion or merely routine. And there are always 2 opposing camps. One is the domain of belief, The other is the faction of those who consider themselves in the know. Whoever situates himself between these two extremes cannot be classified, and the effect of this position is to raise doubts as well as to incite the hostility of the two opposing camps. Yeah, this what he's pointing out here simply is that there is some truth in what we call science, and there is some truth in religion, but it's not the whole truth. It's WHOLE, that is, it's not the whole truth. But what you're doing is you're going to be on the middle path between the two pedestals, so to speak. And so what you're looking for here is to dig, or you're supposed to ask questions between, okay, are they really, what are they talking about here, such and such? Begin to ask questions about and probe about these things. And unfortunately, we have some people, the writers have done this, you see. Sometimes, however, there is a explosion that shatters the limits, that is, breaking the quietude of a routine one likes to call peace. Our century has experienced such as upheavals. That is, I am referring, of course, to the atomic explosion, not to the bomb itself, but far more important, to the disturbance it brought, which reversed the orientation of our mentality. With Lavoisier, the past century also experienced such an explosion of the framework of thinking. At that time, all the conjectures of a creation mystic, considering as fanciful, were rejected, giving to those who presumed to know a solid terrain for constructing a world according to their image. Nowadays, that terrain no longer seems as stable as it had been expected. Those who considered themselves in the know are already beginning to lose footing, you see. But this does not suffice to give strength to those who believe. There's today a generalized sense of uncertainty, causing disorder in the social domain as well as in the moral conduct. That is generally what I call, but the majority of people endure this effect without understanding its origins. It just basically goes over people's heads. Far more important to people's lives than economic or technical consideration is that state of mind, that mentality which can be inspired only by a higher authority, independent of the passion-ridden influences of the majority. But nowadays, the world is governed by fictions, you see, fictions of social doctrines, of scientific promises, you see, and those fallacies, promises, are based on erudite arguments whose vicious circle is no longer noticed. Actually, the social order must bow to the techno generated by the science. You see, in other words, everybody puts down and worships science. Although we're becoming, that was, this is written in the 1900s, folks. So we're talking about 100 years ago, approximately. And so what we're talking about simply is that people are lifted this particular God. That's what they're doing, lifting up science as though it's going to save mankind. And it has not done that. The more technology we've gotten, in a lot of ways, has been, somewhat convenient in some ways, but in which we have more time to do certain things, which we should be doing that right now, reading and digging into certain, what I call esoteric works, and begin to kind of understand why we're here. No one knows why they're here, folks. No one. No one knows why they're here. In fact, no one even asked that question. You see. And so let's see, I've gotten all to tangent here a little bit. And science in turn must constantly adapt to a social order whose stability is compromised by the uncoordinated passions of the human being. The discovery and demonstration of energy as a kinetic phenomenon of mass does not explain the mass, which becomes an unknown. This formula amounts to saying that if I throw a stone, that stone, the mass in motion, represents energy. The extreme speed square is then the stable element for all energy. The mass, the weight of the stone, stays variable. The speed of light squared is the great discovery in the Einstein formula. That is, it is a practical tool that permits one to make do, but yields no essential information. Yet it opens the doors to all the discoveries in nuclear energy. Now, our little world thinks only in terms of atomic energy, referring to it as all physical, chemical, and astrophysical phenomenon. Among those who have thus been led astray, the so-called alchemists of our time are of particular interest to us. They belong neither to the physics, that is, physicists, not to the dreaded mystics or pre-laborious times, as they imagine they can identify atomic energy with spirit, the origins of matter. May these few seekers understand that they must not allow themselves to be deluded by the rational science which is leading the world to disaster, as they willingly let themselves be called utopians that might as well accept the principle of a sacred science that testifies to a divine science. What proofs are there of this sacred science? Simple logic, no less, tells us that the material world, the world of the notorious mass, cannot have been created with matter. It is only after having studied most of the serious works on the strange subject from I'll just spell it to you, Zosima, Zosima, to the latest writings which date back about a century ago, that I place sacred texts and myths in parallel to the development of what is called the Hermetic opus. Whatever the images and terms of the sacred accounts, be they the Vedas, the Nordics, sages, the texts of ancient Egypt, the Old Testament, or the revelations of the Gospels, there exists as an undeniable parallelism between these two expressions of a knowledge concerning the origins, the becoming, and the aim of life. Now, I've talked to, when we were talking with Phil and me, someone gave me this example long ago. Unless you're aiming for the bullseye, which is the truth, all truth, the complete truth, the whole truth, you will miss the mark. And you are the arrow, you see. And once you shoot yourself in the bow, you're aiming for the truth. That's what I see is the description of the bullseye, you see. I need to research to see why the name is called bullseye. I don't know that, but anyway, the point simply is the bullseye is true, the whole truth. The question is, what object could be the aim of the Hermetic opus? It will necessarily be an undetermined substance and not a mineral, plant, or animal being. This substance can be none but the vital fire, that is life, capable of being transmuted to a specific being in order to lead that being to its own perfection. This indeed is what all good texts emanate, I should say. Because of the parallelism with the ultimate becoming of the human, this available life essence is called the king, the cosmic man. But it must be recognized that attaining the aim of the Hermetic opus is not an end. It is the beginning, you see. It is the beginning of the light that illuminates reality. It would be a serious error, I am convinced, to fail to reverse the problem. Granted that the Hermetic opus elucidates and demonstrates the meaning of sacred texts and myths, it is evident that what is somehow of a prime importance is the homogenization of the book of Genesis, that is Genesis Revelation. Man as a thinking, conscious being is the only important reality here. It is he, the human being, as bodily creature animated by the divine breath, absolute being who endures the entire passions of the Hermetic opus in order to attain, if possible, to the royal perfection is represented by the renowned philosopher's stone. Attempting to understand the significance of sacred science in its mere material representation distorts the intention of the sages. I am certain, moreover, that such comprehension is fated never to attain the aim proposed, be it in one sense or the other. The neters, Neters, are the cosmic millennia, and it is the successive states of conscious vision of these principles that give true meaning to human life. The king, the true king, is the living being who has reached the stage of immortal and consciousness, returned to the source of the soul that animates him. Such is the aim proposed. Sacred science demonstrates and proves, but the spiritual ascent of man is the path to be realized. So that's the forward, and now we're going to look at chapter 1 here concerning theocracy. Pharonic Theocracy is neither an institution worked out along logical lines nor a government imposed by a religious organization. It is difficult for our mentality to understand how and why royal power and religious guidance can be unified. The state and the government of the country are the essential concerns of the administration with its hierarchy of power representation. Justice, economics, and military power are apparently incompatible with religion, whose aim is to govern personal conduct in life and the salvation of souls. These are the terms by which we understand the organization of a civilized society. It is true that in the light of 19th century science, it is possible to eliminate the existence of a religious body as quite unnecessary to those who are social beings, namely those who possess the herd instinct. From that point of view, man is but a living phenomenon without origin or continuity. A physical, physico-chemical accident, according to the problem posed by a theocracy order, obviously does not exist. There is no God, some would say. There are only material needs that can be catered to through technology. Here suffice that the individual submit to the life conditions and laid down by the herd and follows direction. And remember, the herd is basically here. He's using a mentality of most people who just simply follow what other people are doing. This is a narrative that's been going on for probably approximately nearly 200 years, as we've gone from what I would call a agrarian society into what I call industrial society. And if you understand how agrarian works, you're not quite a robot in that particular instance, but when you're in a factory or somehow, you continue to repeat doing things over and over and over again, which is the industrialization. And what happens simply is you're in some ways, many ways, like a robot. You're not even there. You're not aware of anything around you, so to speak. And this is what has taken place basically since the 1860s. And it probably was even before that. It's probably 200 years, basically, from the 1830s. Started in New England here, and it's even started earlier in some parts of England, such and such. But the point simply is that what's happened simply is that we're on what I call automatic. It's like pushing a button, so to speak, when you're in a factory and to turn the machine on, and you push it, and it starts running. You see, and we become somewhat like that, mechanical, but we're not mechanical. We're not mechanical. This submission can continue for a time, but it cannot continue forever. The history of humanity has known similar crises several times before. But man, even when dazed by dialectic Sophius, is not a machine without a soul. And this soul, which emanates physical man, necessitates, transcends the corporal. Pharonic theocracy is exceptional, a government and social order unique in all of Western history. Did a similar order exist during the great Celtic epoch of the Druids? He asked that question. The lack of documents does not permit us to so affirm. Assyria and Babylonian, on the other hand, never knew true theocracy, which is the domination of the entire life of a people by spiritual truths. We translate theological directive by the word religion, but the meaning attached to this term nowadays is incompatible with the mentality of the Pharaonic times. According to the evidence inscribed during a period of our over 4,000 years, ancient Egypt did not have a religion as such. It was religion in its entirety, in the broadest and purest acceptance of the term. And I'm going to speculate here when he says this because when Ankhenaten came to power as a pharaoh, when his dad passed away, and he became a pharaoh at a very young age. I think he's around 16 years old. He had some issues, and the issue was simply was he was not what I call spiritually developed, and he has also had some physical limitations in his life. And what's transpired, most people don't notice, and people are following a guy named John Lash out there who is actually deceiving people. Um, it's it's unbelievable what people sell books these days just for money, and they'll make up stuff. Okay, and Ankhenaten is basically he decided that basically the country no longer needed religion, and so he actually did change that, and he made himself God. And anybody would see that as basically you're crossing the line here. You went off on a tangent here, a big tangent, meaning that you've forgotten who you are, or you think you're better than everybody else. And so that's what he did with the support of his family. And so, and they actually, the temples and all that, where people were given all this information at a very early age, what we call somewhat what I call a mystery school, but it's not a mystery school in this way. You remember, this is part of Egypt. Unfortunately, most people are not even understanding simply is that when you're here in this life as a mortal, with them no longer being able to share this information that they knew about what I would call the deeper things when someone was there within the temple and would give them wisdom such and such so that they would be able to move on and no longer come here as a mortal, meaning you die. I'm talking about physical death. We don't die. We have an immortal spirit, or we have a spirit within us. It's immortal. It doesn't die. But our bodies itself is a trick. Meaning it simply is that it's mortal. We will die, you see. And that's part of what I call the reincarnation wheel, such and such. We continue to reincarnate here. And the reason why we reincarnate here is because we haven't passed the test. And it's basically deal with what I call what is your life like? When you die, you will basically be gone to a place that basically they will weigh you as a feather of your heart and your intentions in life. And if you is not light as a feather, you will be automatically told to go back into and reincarnate here again. And most don't want to come back here because in reality, this place it's a hell. It is. In all ways, folks, in almost every category. So anyway, I've kind of digressed here. We cannot understand this. Egyptologists have searched in vain to discover by what means a great people, visible, highly civilized, rich in the arts, powerful in organization, could have been led to accept such a unification of temporal and spiritual powers, always returning to this order despite grave crisis and periodical interruptions in the long duration of the empire of the two crowns. And the two crowns again are simply the government and religion, you see. In the conclusion of his convincing thesis on the religious characteristics of Pharaonic royalty, Alexander Moret, Moret, admits his failure to understand how this conception of the king's divinity could have gained prominence. Well, the king was, folks, he went into the school of religion. He went there and he basically understood until the corruption came from Akhenaten. You are not worthy of being a pharaoh, rule, unless you go through these the teachings that was taught in this particular school, not school, but religion that was taught at the temple. And You were not allowed to be. You were not allowed to be the. You couldn't rule over Egypt unless you did that. But Akhenaten got away with that. He was a very sick person emotionally, you see, and that's the downfall of Egypt. It started there. That's where it happened, and I think that's in the 17th or 18th dynasty, as well as I recollect. Let's see. Get back to this. The pharaoh is, yeah. Okay. The pharaoh is distinguished from the other priest kings in that he is connected to the gods by birth as much by the sacerdotal dignity. He is God because he is priest, but he is only priest inasmuch as he is the son of the gods. So what he's saying simply is he is God because he's a priest. Well, that's what happened. He actually learns this information and is taught this information in order before he becomes a pharaoh. This concept of royalty, at once divine and sacerdotal, existed from the first known times of Egypt history. The political regime that stemmed from it endured for 40 centuries and showed itself to be the most permanent element of the entire Egyptian civilization, the most immune to revolutions. The transient accession of the priesthood to royalty did bring change to the reciprocal relationship between the king and the gods. The humble mortal priest of Ammon, promoted to king by a stroke of fortune, becomes subordinate to divine majesty. But if the person of the king occasionally underwent a diminution of authority during the course of several centuries, the principles of divine and priestly royalty survived until the Roman period and disappeared only with Egyptian religion itself under the influence of Christianity. It's a big deal, isn't it? You see, when Rome took over, but even before that, he doesn't talk about this. He doesn't talk about simply the Alexandria of Greek that actually came in also and dealt with Egypt. The Greeks. New ideas concerning the character of the royal personage were doubtlessly introduced into Egypt with the Ptolemies and the Caesars. In the sovereign entourage, a cult of the king was celebrated, which was more in conformance with Hellenic civilization, meaning Greek. But the Egyptian temples never knew and never acknowledged these modifications, whether the king was Greek or Roman. Whether or not he also claimed divine descent from his country's god, this was of no importance. In the temples where the foreign king was less and less frequently mentioned by name, that is, he was called the son of Isis, Isis, or the pharaoh, continued to celebrate and to receive the unchanging Osiris rituals of ancient times. One keeps wondering what elements were used by the theologians of Heliopolis to form the royal doctrine and how they progressively instilled into the minds of the people a belief that maintained a hold on Egypt for 40 centuries. Remember that Akhenaten he moved the capital. He moved it. He moved it, folks. He moved it to another place. One element is missing from all the speculation attempting to clarify this enigma: the bonding that joins cause to effect, as in the problem of magic raised by Dr. Francois Lexis, Lexa, but the effect, true theocracy, exists. Hence the cause, the theology of the temple necessary commands a mean term as demanded by the law of causality. As we shall see, this mean term indeed constitutes the entire thesis. It comprehends cause and effect as a single entity, sacred science to preeminent sacerdotal science, which since the beginning of the empire was the science of thought, T-H-O-T, thought, master of divine words and sacred writings. This science, written on papyrus scrolls, included the myth as well as the religious rituals, medicine, geometry, astronomy, and the laws of everyday life and of justice. These sacred books were kept in the sanctuaries of the Egyptian temples and were accessible only to the higher religious and royal authorities. Yet it was quite natural for any scribe to call himself a servant of thought, the patron of writing. The Greeks, therefore, in their contact with a declining Egypt, were prompted to speak of science in general as belonging to thought, or Hermes. The meaning of sacred science was thus vulgarized under the term hermetics. In other words, it was began to soften, began to be deteriorated. In truth, the purpose of this modest offering is to convey a succinct understanding of the important reality of sacred science, which is not to be confused with the vernacular meaning conveyed by Hermeticism. This understanding demands a look at the history of thought in the West and at the history of man in the light of that thought. What is the general attitude in our day towards this Hermetic science, usually referred to as alchemy? The word is of Islamic origin and signifies the science of alchemy, encountered by the Arab invaders of Egypt, that ancient Camel, which gave so much light to Islam setting out to conquer the world. For nearly everyone, alchemy is the science of making gold and nothing more. For some, it is a fantasy. For others, a mysterious science of fascinating discovery. There are also the spiritual minded who consider alchemy to be a spiritual science of transforming consciousness and the acquisition of psychic, if not spiritual powers. Today, by means of violent perpetration on the atom, nuclear science has managed to demonstrate the possibility of the transmutation of bodies previously considered to be simple and unalterable. It is claimed, therefore, that the dream of the old alchemists have been realized at last. The fact of transmutation, as demonstrated by contemporary science, completely alters the conception of matter accepted in the 19th century, and early concepts of evolution basics to materialistic science is thereby unsettled. These transmutations achieved by brute force have nothing in common, however, with what the Hermetic tradition understood transmutation to be. And yet there is something of sacred science that continues to radiate through a vulgarized alchemy. This aspect, however, has remained occulted, meaning hidden. Remember, the word occult means hidden. The erroneous conceptions of transmutation given by our rationalistic and materialistic science causes the latter to be not only inhumane in its consequences, but evil as well, in that it diverts us from the true endeavor. The science of thought is the salutatorial science of all times because it is founded on the irrational basis and would be totally absurd otherwise. Its foundations are identical to those of every other philosophy concerning with the beginning of things. No determinate body can serve as a point of departure for the alchemic opus, because what is involved is not the decomposition of matter, notwithstanding the beliefs of our but a generation of the matter of the world in the image of creation. Thus, we are concerned here with revealed knowledge and not with a rational science. Hold on just a second here. I think I have a question. Let's see. Come on. Okay. Anyway, back to what I was reading here. Uh, Thus, we are concerned here with the revealed knowledge and not with rational science. Few are they who have been able to penetrate the secret of the beginning as a spiritual commitment. Those who have succeeded have left a token of assistance of the science by means of riddle or allegories. That's what it's about, folks. This is all in allegories. The Bible was even written in allegories. It's esoteric. It's not exoteric. It's esoteric. And most cannot figure out what it's about, naturally, because they don't understand it, because they're reading it literally, you see. But I would say simply the Bible is a very important book. In fact, it's filled with all kinds of myths, but those myths reveal truth in them, you see. And especially through theological reflections, they have described the process of work and the phases of becoming, yet without revealing the essential secret. With Hermetic texts as a basis, Western writing as well as those of the ancient sages, it is possible to reach a fairly clear idea of the Hermetic process. In order to compare this to sacred teachings, in particular to those of the Pharonic temple, despite the obvious concordance, however, it should still be asked whether these Hermetic texts with gold as their bait did not simply transmit theological teachings in a seductive manner. This doubt has been removed since the nuclear science demonstrated the instability of simple elements, that is, thus annulling the absolutist argument which chemistry in principle opposed to the possibility of transmutation. It is evident that transmutation proved by science has no relationship to theological principles, but the fact remains certain today for everyone that there is a common energetic origins to all bodies, and this brings us close to metaphysic association by the beginning of things. The possibility of transmutation through a path of Genesis, which is a word meaning beginning, is confirmed by a number of writings from Pharaonic Egypt as well as from the transition time of Greco-Roman Egypt, and even from fairly recent times in Europe. In accordance with all theologies, all these texts are founded on the certainty that it is the divine word, the Holy Spirit, which alone is able to animate matter, and that therein lies the secret of origin. The separation between those two concepts reflect the divorce of two irreconcilable mentalities. One of those concepts points for the variety of types, the other calls upon an undefined cosmic energy. With absurd reasoning, our science sees in the universe nothing but a closed circuit, a allomeric, and a decomposition of the substance matter. Such a view is certainly less reasonable than the admission of an undefined source of energy which becomes matter, although the latter solution poses a purely metaphysical problem. From there, it is but a very small step to seeing a divine principle in the harmony of the world. It is certain that the ordinary mind does not view things in this way and dreams only of making gold in order to become rich, without realizing that if a simple secret of manufacture were involved, gold would, in case, cease to be of value. Paradoxically, therefore, it is the rationalist science which justifies the possible existence of a sacred science based on an origin irrational in itself. Thus, there exists proof of what is affirmed by anecdotal science and demonstrates the genesis of the great work of the universe. That great work must take place within you. That's what happens, folks. That's what this is all about. It's the great work. It's you. And it usually is through what I call esoteric means. And you have to have a drive for that. You have to have a desire for that more than anything else in your life. Hence, there is a parallelism between the teachings of the phases of becoming of a perfect substance that is spiritual in its origins and its finality, and sacred teachings, whatever they may be. Sacred science is like a grid, a colored background upon which all moments of the Pharonic teachings can be inscribed. I think I want to say one thing here. We're talking about alchemy and this whole idea with gold. Do you understand how this is used in some ways to keep people who are actually they would destroy what I would call the real goal, GOAL, in your life is to become an angel here on this planet, and so they use another word such and such, and so people go after gold, the materialistic gold, which is not the truth. That's part of esoteric. It's mystery. You see, God will give you eyes to see, but those who want to profane or destroy something will not get to see the truth. They won't. One of the impossibilities to transmutations of elements proves that the beginning announced by the texts must be true. The thing in itself is then of small importance, since its entire history can be read and situated. Thus, the entire passion of Osiris and the more profound passion of Christ can be lived in oneself. Passion must be considered here not as suffering, but as the joy of being able to envision resurrection beyond humankind. This principle pertains to every being who decides to pursue the true path. To generate the opus magnum is to generate within us the liberation from our suffering and moral condition, and inversely, to search for this liberation is also realize the opus magnum. The possibility of making gold has always been used by sages to hoodwink fools, so that the children of wisdom, who cannot be deceived by selfish satisfactions, may be led towards the true path, which is the search for the real vision of the universe. Without the promise of gold, would the texts of what we call master medicines have been disseminated, safeguarded, and respected by the ignorant? Of course not. We can now conclude that the foundation stone of wisdom is unspecified and belongs to none other than the three kingdoms. Yet its nature is to animate all. It is a spiritual, may also, of course, be directed or oriented towards material or mineral, that is metal, towards plant and towards animal, as in medicine for the human body. So it is medicine for the It is medicine for the metal. It eliminates all impurities. You see, do you see the assimilation here? Leaving only the purity of perfect equilibrium. Did the Lord Christ not cure leprosy? The formula life dash health dash strength, which is always joined to the Pharaoh's name, is translated as a wish addressed to him, when it is he, the true King of Kings, who dispenses life, health, and strength. Following a path charted by sacred science, this is how the world appears. There is generation, that is the development of matter as a fetal becoming. There is fixation into the corporeality of cosmic energy. There is a irrational source at the origin of things. There is a resurrection of spiritualized corporeality in a return towards the source, as corporate matter is but a transitional and relative aspect of activity and reactivity of two natures, sundry and issue from a cosmic oneness. This final matter is the only true king. Theology and science then reside in one single expression. Therefore, there exists a completely different relation of man towards universe, and hence the possibility of a civilization such as it's found in Pharonic Egypt, in ancient India, and in ancient China. Accordingly, there are many revisions to be brought to our judgment regarding ancient peoples of whom only traces remain, such as the Maya, M-A-Y-A, and the Inca, I-N-C-A, instead of concerning itself with the decomposition of matter in order to find energy, instead of attempting to explain everything through the analysis of matter, that is, its decomposition, its aging, its radioactivity, instead of pursuing this false track. The legitimate concern of science should be the search for the true source of matter. That source epitomizes by this word, which says it all, God. And in that light, to study the becoming of forms that inhabit the universe. To some, these statements will seem no more than a relapse, a regression to the old beliefs, to superstition, to the Purite status, P-U-R-E-R-I-L, Purite status, devote of scientific spirit of a time happily transcended. To this I reply, we are concerned with a proven reality and not a belief. I also mean to say that it is variable elite which forms the temple, a radiating temple, and not a temple that imposes a exclusivist dogma, restraining and contracting any impulses of expansion of thought or of the arts. A temple based its theological teachings on proofs given by scientific demonstration. This demands the two paths of possible survival, which lead quite naturally to theocracy. The myth being, but a support to the people and a guide for the man wanting and able to elevate himself. I earnestly anticipate the time when the enlightened being will be able to bring the world proof of the mystery of beginning. There is much talk of the new age, quote unquote, Aquarius. This time is in preparation, but not yet come. When his will come, this prophet who will establish a new world. Then there will no longer remain any doubt concerning the Pharonic teachings or about the words of the Gospels or the promises of authentic sacred texts. It is said that Christianity, that is, universal in character, is the last reaching brought to man. In the word of epoch ending, it is a time that there is no higher teachings, but there is a constant beginning anew. One must always begin again, and it is due to the constant renewal that those who have not sinned against the Holy Spirit, meaning those who have not definitely repudiated the Spirit, which makes and animates all, may come and go in order to discover the light at last. The predominant idea developed in the Pharonic Book of the Dead is expressed by its title, Book of Coming Forth by Day. These teachings promise the pure that their soul will be allowed to go and to come, that is, to return to the terrestrial world. The impure, on the other hand, the rejected ones, those who have sinned against the Holy Spirit, will know the second death, the definite death, the eclipse of the sun described in the book of Quererts, Quererts, which is also the book of Caverns, Caverns, the most dreaded of punishments. Next area is called distances. More than 3,000 years separated us from the flourishing epoch of the 18th Pharaonic dynasty, that of Amenhotep. Sorry about that. Something keeps coming up here and irritates me. The Thermericites at Hatshepsut, the American experiment, and the restoration of the cult of Ammon with Tut, Anka, and Ammon. Stepping back as time is less impressive for us than comparing today's progress with the state of things a mere 50 years ago. Here we can compare, there we cannot. Inspired by natural egoism, our complacency permits us to go back not only 3,000 years into humanity history, but with paleoanthropology to turn the clock easily back 25 or 50,000 years in order to join the presumed moment when a anthropod opens the path towards a Homo sapiens capable of coordinating his thoughts 50,000 years. A conservative estimate, as far as I am concerned, have no significance for us. As to the history of the origin and becoming of thinking man, this backward movement into time constitutes for the anthropologist only a stripping, that is, a sort of unclothing of the faculties, the qualities, and the powers we have attained over a hostile nature. On the testimony of a few bones and some rock drawings and figurines found in caves, we undress morally and unintelligibly to the point of being no more than caveman. As long as the operation is purely subtractive, everything is easy, since once and for all we accept that at a certain moment all that could have happened was that an animal fatium developed towards a thinking human in order to end with our present superiority. For our science, the difficulty starts with the possible motivation for the various gestures and conditions making for the successive acquisitions, such as upright press posture, that is, or the change from a hairy animal into a naked man in need of animal furs to clothe himself. To such a concept of paleontology, one can compare the wisdom tradition that speaks of the genesis of man in general through races and subraces in conformity with man's fetal evolution. The faculties awaken successfully just as the organs are formed in the embryo. In that case, there exists a genetic vision of becoming, that is a genesis, like the genesis or growth of any other seed. At the origin, there is a human seed, just as there is a seed for any living thing. This concept, of course, is really from a rational science which denies the mystical and the metaphysical moment, as its reasoning must link everything in logical and mechanical matter. I wonder, I'm just going to say this is not one of his parts, but I just wonder simply is that once we went to the Industrial Revolution, man got a lot of kind of knowledge, so to speak, but he's forgotten where he came from, so to speak, because you do need logic, folks. You do need to be able to understand things. You see. Let me drink another some glass of water here. An attempt now is being made to combine paleology with genetics in order to construct to justify the science of evolution. Made in the name of phenomenon of mutations, this attempt finds its weakness is precisely in the fact that causes of mutations are unknown. We are dealing here with a confirmed phenomenon. Its causes, however, remain mysterious. And find that is subtracting is easy where life is concerned, but to add in that case is senseless. The arguments that motivate the multiple conditions demanded by the slightest step on the path from unreasonable animals to thinking man end up taking refuge in statistics and in calculations of probability. Our tendency to judge the past on the basis of a comparison with ourselves, a perfectly natural tendency, moreover, conceives duration not as a factor separating an ancient civilization from ours, but rather as an evolutionary succession. Past civilization is held to be inferior to ours since it has preceded us. And in fact, that's the way we always think, folks. We think that, oh, the more we go ahead, we're ahead of everything else. You see, we're modern. We don't have, such and such. But in reality, we don't have any wisdom. You see, that's my conjecture here. In fact, neither time nor space separates profoundly. In order to attain true divorce, there must be a difference of mentality. The state of mind separates or unites. We must search the state of mind for the mainspring of all behavior. This holds true for the phases of man's development as well as for the history of humanity, which differs from the humanity of today's history. Whatever it be, the origins of humanity, and we shall return to this problem, we must first of all agree that the diverse orientation in its development are possible. Necessarily, that is, those orientations are conditioned first by the physical millennia within which evolution takes place, and next by the intelligent contact of humanity with natural phenomena. This contact can be more specifically cerebral or emotional, but it can also be intuitive, by which I mean consciously, instinctively. The three aspects necessary interplay, but the predominant of one of those contacts determine the different characters you see. The mental intelligent, the religio-mystical, or else the wisdom character. The character is reflected in the mentality of a people, and particularly in the mentality of the leaders of that people. When mentality is preferable, today one would readily opt for the results from mental intellectual contact, as did the Greeks, and before them, the decadent Babylonians. All things considered, the result and an end susceptible of attainment acts as determining factor. These mentalities make for the only true separation between peoples and civilization. Emotionality certainly predominates among Black Africans, and then animus remains vitally incomprehensible to the rational mind. Inversely, no reasoning can convince the devout animus who lives intensely on the physical level and remains in communion with the spirits of the dead, while the rationalist will create a scholarly way of thinking and a mechanicalism science. The intuitive is much more rarely encountered than the emotional or the intelligence. Sorry, I said intelligent. I meant to say intellectual. But such were the Sumerians, as far as we can determine, and to the higher degree, the Pharonian caste, CASTE, of ancient Egypt, as their works and writings testify. There is no more perfect divorce from the mentality of natural wisdom which prevails in ancient Egypt than the one imposed in recent times by Western mentality. The latter is purely cerebral. They are two epochs. two humanities that cannot understand one another as long as they persist in judging each other by their respective frames of mind. This distance has not always been so precisely marked. However, it is only the recent outcome of the Western orientation that shows a strict opposition between the two mentalities. For the Occident to reach this extreme and perfect intellectual definition, it had to be implanted with a seed that grew slowly and in spite of the apparent opposition of the Roman Catholic Church at a time when the latter tinged our entire civilization with religiosity. But it is precisely the evangelical character, that is revelation, that provokes the future development of a rational search. We will understand this better when discussing the nature of myth. Pure and simple faith seeks no proof. But a day comes when science counterbalances this faith. In scholastic times, during those let's see, where am I at here? During those intermittent discussions, men delegate themselves in secret and on the basis of ancient readiness, that is, traditions called hermetic, to the search for a science that is for tangible proofs of the truths asserted by the Christus or Christus revelation. Most believers were confused by the historical human aspect by means of which these truths were spread, and they failed to understand the cosmic character of the images and parables of the gospel. Yes, they have. It was the aim of the few wise men who understood the universe character of this readings or the teachings, and in those times it was an obligation as well to formulate eternal truth with Christus images and words, whence the attempt by Jonathan Andreas to form a Rosicrucian society around the myth of Christian Rosicrucians. At all events, the rows of sages around the symbol of the cross is a reality for the precedent age or era of Pisces, you see, the age of the fish. Jesus Christ, divine incarnation, is truth. And the science that is so demonstrated is the sacred science of all times, the sacred science and white magic of the temple. In the West, the few enlightened adepts of the Middle Ages were forced to hide. If they wrote, their duty always being to leave some testimony of the truth. Of their science that they could do so only anonymously or perhaps under the protection of a personality powerful enough to assimilate governmental and ecclesiastic suspicions. Believing themselves sufficiently strong in escape control of these two powers, the Knights Templar were led to the stake by their own audacity when those two villains joined forces against them. But man's curiosity cannot be squelched. A few principles of Hermetic science were circulating at large, and profane spirits with positivism, mind, ignorant of metaphysical causes, were gradually able to formulate a chemical and physical science. Not having been found on the abstract realities of philosophy, this science took on a rational form. Thus, Hermetic principles of fire eventually became philology, a fiery principle immanent in certain materials and rendering them combustible. This concept remained in vogue until Lavoisier, Lavoisier, demonstrated the fact that oxygen sustained combustion, combining as gas, burning, oxidizing the elements, and being susceptible of recovery. Nothing created, nothing lost. With that thunderclap, science heralded the era of atheism, shaking the foundation of faith, henceforth opposed by the facts of reasoning. The science that is the pride of our times is very recent, but the spirit of dialectic, that inherent temptation concealed in man's nature, dates from the beginning of so-called thinking humanity. Dialectics is reasoning, and reasoning needs tangible facts. Armed with synchronistic logic, the same logic for which the old scholastics had to find all possible combinations, is finally formulators only mechanicalistic thinking. In those Middle Ages, believers, after performing their devotions, had only to work and to discuss. Devotions in them resides the entire Western Middle Ages. God assumed human incarnation in order to suffer all the evil caused by the original sin. Always said there is nothing further to seek. There is only prayer for the individual soul's salvation. In a definite sense, each one is personally responsible for his own salvation or damnation, so says the Church. This authorization, excluding all research, be it even that of a sacred science, will provoke the reaction which I call the science of evil, or it is false. Its own possible consequences are an inhumane effect, it being purely technical and means only for utilitarian aims exterior to man's intimate life. The final destruction then becomes logical, if only through the absurdity of a life without spiritual aim and the atropia of the senses which causes man to lose contact with his work. We are far removed from the Pharonic times when science was a knowledge of causes, when work was the fusion of the artisan with his craft. There has never been a greater distance between consciousness than there is in our times between Western mentality and the mentality of the ancient Egyptian sages. And that is the conclusion of chapter 1. And let me see if I can get back to what I want to see here. This particular book. And I was going to see if there's anything else here to share, and there is not in chapter 1. So this is my conclusion of chapter 1 today from the book called Sacred Science, The King of Pharonic Theocracy by Rene Schwaller de Lubicz. So I hope that you enjoy the talk today, and appreciate you being here. Let's see, I have a comment here. Eyes to see, lots of laughs. So weird because I was just thinking about the Veda and how, the veil, and how everything is related to spirit, the one, the truth. Yes, that's from Slighted Slanted Sleuth for the Truth. Good to hear from you, Steve. I think this is going to be my conclusion today. I probably will do chapter 2 a little later. I've got to get some lunch. But I wanted to read this particular book. Just wanted to expound some of the things that were part of this book here. The next particular chapter will be called The Deviation. Thank you for the comment, Steve. Hope everything's well with you. I'm sure it's cold where you're at. It's cold here in the South. So good to see you. And again, thank you for being here. Appreciate your comments. And hopefully we will do another chapter today. This particular book I'm reading is online. It's pretty hard to read. It doesn't have a white background, so it makes it a lot harder for me to read. So that's why I'm stumbling a little bit on that particular chapter. But we'll get through it. Thank you for being here. For those who have eyes to hear, have ears to hear and eyes to see, may your heart be able to discern what is true. Thank you. Have a good day.